There must be some kind of way out of here, said Diallo to Luxury. It's interpolation.
It's actually a cover.
From Dylan to Jimmy. And all along the Watchtower, Jimi Hendrix Part 2. And if you like what you hear right now, give us 5 stars, not 2. I like it. I like it.
One note guitar solo.
Luxury, this is the second part of our two-parter on Jimi Hendrix, and today's song is a cover, like you just said. It's a cover, and in fact, many people say today's song is the greatest cover of all time, the ultimate cover.
Is it the ultimate cover? It could be. Maybe that's overstated. In my personal opinion, I think it's an incredible cover. I think that there's lots of great covers out there.
There's some great covers out there, but I think the same way that people talk about The Godfather Part 2 sort of being the ultimate class act sequel,
Okay.
I feel like this is the ultimate class act cover.
I think it's well put. I can't add or contribute or improve upon that. Let's just leave it right there. Show's over. Bye, guys. But listen, it's definitely up there with the greatest covers of all time.
Yeah.
And that after Jimmy, this became the definitive version of the song, even for Bob Dylan himself, who wrote and performed the original version, but after 1974, only played Jimmy's version live.
That's right. It's actually the only Jimi Hendrix song to ever crack the top 40. It's his best-selling single of all time, reaching number 6 in the UK and number 20 in the United States.
It's also an important song lyrically, contextually, historically, and musically. And luckily, we have the stems.
We do, yes. Today we're talking about one song, and that song is All Along the Watchtower by the Jimi Hendrix Experience.
There must be some kind of way out of here, said a joker to the thief.
I'm actor, writer, director, and sometimes DJ Diallo Riddle.
And I'm producer, DJ, songwriter, and musicologist Luxury, aka the guy who whispers interpolation.
And this is one song.
The show where we break down the stems and stories behind iconic songs across genres, tell you why they deserve one more listen.
That's right, you will hear these songs like you've never heard them before. And if you want to watch one song, I know, crazy idea, you can watch this full episode on YouTube and Spotify. And while you're there, please like and subscribe. All right, this is the second part of our Jimi Hendrix two-parter. If you didn't already listen to our episode about Purple Haze, which came out last week, go check that one out right now.
So Diallo, when did you first hear the song All Along the Watchtower, and whose version was it?
It was definitely Jimmy's.
Okay.
And I kind of love the fact that for the longest time, my only real exposure to this song was a record compilation, you know, like one of those like Freedom Rock. Like,
hey man, is that Freedom Rock?
Hey, turn it up,
turn
man.
it up, man. Did we make that joke last week? It's a good joke. Let's use it every episode from now on.
No, but what's funny is that, you know, because I only knew this song from that commercial, the only lyrics to this song that I knew was All Along the Watchtower. And then it's like, I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. Like, that's always like,
Sunshine, go away.
That commercial was just a mega mix to me. And this was the only section of All Along the Watchtower that I knew. I knew that I liked it, but I only knew that section.
I never thought about it, but that commercial is kind of like Paul's Boutique, where I go through the world and then I'll hear the sample sources from the Beastie Boys sampled record, but it's just the fragments of all those like hippie songs.
Dude, I thought the Beatles sang every song on Stars on 45, so I thought they did Sugar Do 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 Do, like every song on Stars on 45.
Yes.
Candy girl, and you got me wanting you. 1, 2, 3, 4. This happened once before. I can't do your
If you guys are old enough to remember Stars on 45, it was this mega mix.
It's so good, too.
And it has a lot of Beatles
10
songs
seconds
on
per
it.
Beatles song, and then it goes right to the next one.
And that might have been one of my very first exposures to the Beatles. I was like, man, these guys got hits. What about you, man? When was the first time you heard All Along the Watchtower?
I probably heard this song for the first time on a Jimi Hendrix best of. I'm sorry, sometimes it happens that way.
Why? Never apologize.
Yeah,
this is a
no.
safe place. We are always vulnerable.
True.
Come on.
Listen, I was a huge Jimmy fan. Like, we're going to talk about Axis Bold of Love, one of my favorite all-time records, his second record, the one that came before this one. This is from Electric Ladyland. But I only heard this song when I was in Paris on my junior year abroad, went to the Virgin Megastore, and they had listening stations, and there was this Jimi Hendrix best of, and I'm like, you know what, I should know a little more Jimi Hendrix. I bought it, and it did turn me on to a whole bunch of tunes I didn't know,
great.
like this one.
I love that. So let's pick up where our last episode ended. After Purple Haze, Jimmy and the Experience released a follow-up album, Axis Bold as Love. Great cover to this one. Many, especially at the time, actually felt that this album was not as classic as the previous Are You
They
Experienced?
were all wrong. They were all wrong. Better record.
I feel your opinion coming on. But there were people who felt like it was a bit of a sophomore slump. Not everybody here in the studio, obviously. I know that Jimmy himself at the time said he felt rushed.
I feel what's crazy about that record, and looking back at the dates of all three of the major studio records, is they're all done 7 months after Are You Experienced came out. Access Bold of Love.
Insane.
Both of them are 1967,
Insane.
and they're already working on this third record, Electric Ladyland. Jimi Hendrix's output is kind of all within like a 12 to 18 month period. It's incredible how much incredible music came out of that short period of time.
I actually think there's something to be said about like when you're hot, just release a lot of music while you're hot. You know what I mean? Like don't go off and, I mean, some people.
Yeah, Rihanna. Looking at you.
Well, no, I was thinking about like, Kendrick Lamar. Yeah. He doesn't release an album every year. Usually, but when he does release an album, it's usually a pretty big deal. But like, I kind of like the artists who like are coming out with an album every year, so long as it doesn't start to feel hacky. Well, we were Chubby Checker, let's twist again. I don't know. Maybe you should have waited.
He did wait 20 years.
A year.
Listen, I'm just realizing as we're talking about this that there's I won't say skeleton in my closet, but one of the influences on me with this band, one other band who was playing covers of Jimi Hendrix that got me into Jimi Hendrix is the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Full credit where due.
Wow.
I was a fan of the Chili Peppers.
Much maligned Chili Peppers.
In the late 80s, early 90s. Big fan, genuine fan. Like I was
too.
super into them.
Oh, dude, did you like Mother's Milk?
Mother's Milk, Uplift Mofo Party Plan is insanely good.
I truly loved Blood Sugar Sex Magic, and I'm not ashamed to say it. It came out at the right time in my life.
Fine record. And when that record came out, they had been touring on it. They did covers. I heard live versions of at least 3 Jimmy songs from Axis. I think I heard Spanish Castle Magic. They did a version. Castles Made of Sand. And I think Little Wing. Anyway, those 3 songs are 3 incredible Jimi Hendrix songs.
And by the way, I think I was a big fan of Lenny Kravitz, who was obviously, when he wasn't covering Foxy Lady, he was definitely doing a Jimi Hendrix form of music.
Oh my God. And his
genre was Jimi Hendrix.
His sideman, whose name escapes me, looks just like Noel Redding with the whole fro hair. Yeah. My 2 favorite songs on this record are like this far apart on the knowability scale. Little Wing, one of the most gorgeous songs of all time. It's got the chord changes. When you're like a young guitar player, it's one of those songs that you learn quickly, but of course cannot execute in the same way as the master Jimi Hendrix did. And
I don't even think, I'm going to be honest, I don't think I know Lil Wing. Why don't we play a little bit of Little Wing?
Well, she's walking through the clouds with a circus mind.
So good. It gives me chills, like just listening to it.
Sophomore slump.
Ridiculous lyrics.
Sophomore slump, bro.
Let's face it, ridiculous lyrics.
No, I'm playing.
Like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds sort of style, this
it's so
era.
good.
But so good.
That's the first time I'm ever hearing this.
Really?
And it's really good. Yeah, it makes me think that, and I was already feeling this way. I'm on this kick now where I'm going back and re-listening and rediscovering Hendrix, because there's not a ton of music.
There isn't. There's 4 albums, but there's like this rich, like they keep on every year re-releasing stuff from the vault and the archives and live versions. So I think there's whatever, 50, 70.
No, I know. But I think what you're saying is that when I go to discover an artist, like some artists, will have like 20 albums. Right. That's not the case with Jimmy.
Right. It's more like lots of versions of the song you like. So this album went #1, Electric Ladyland, in the US.
Yeah.
And it was recorded and mixed between Olympic Studios in London and the record plant in New York at the top of 1968.
And this album's recorded over quite a bit of time. I mean, they start recording in 1967. They kind of come back to it in 1968. They're going back and forth across the pond. And here's something that I think is just nuts. While recording this album, it's a party in the studio, which was increasingly a problem for bass player Noel Redding and producer Chaz Chandler. But Jimmy is having the time of his life, linking up with A-list rock and rollers.
Yes.
Including one of my favorites. Here's Jimi Hendrix and Jim Morrison of The Doors. That's right, 2 Jims on stage.
Right.
March 1968 at a club called The Scene in New York. Here's a snippet.
I mean, this could be Iggy and the Stooges in Detroit with the MC5. Like, sounds like a proto-punk supergroup.
I do actually feel that way. I do feel like the punks had some love of Jim Morrison. Obviously, the New Romantics loved Jim Morrison. And I just never knew that Jim Morrison had ever taken the stage with Jimi Hendrix.
I didn't know
This is
either.
one thing that I think the internet gets right, which is that there's very little chance that even if you were live in
Yeah.
March of 1968,
Yeah.
that you would know to go to the scene and see these two icons on stage together.
Yeah.
But thankfully, due to the wonders of the internet,
Amazing.
you don't have to. We actually have this archived. And
And
it
AI
exists
could
forever.
never anticipate that the blend of those two would sound like that. Not in a million years.
Well, I think there were probably some drugs involved in both of their performances.
Oh
on
my
that,
God.
on
Well,
that stage that
27
night.
Club. We will be talking about 27 Club, unfortunately, today. Both members of said
That's right.
club, incredibly. And
That's not a club you want to be
no, please don't join that club.
visiting or going into the VIP booth in.
And by the way, Morrison is not our last guest this episode to be a part of that unfortunate club. We'll be talking in a moment about
That's right.
another guest on this record.
Exactly. And it is interesting because the hippie movement was flourishing in our last episode. You know, like we got
Right.
to talk about like the Summer of Love and all that. And here, by 1968, it's all going quite dark.
Things are
You know
getting a
what
little
I mean?
darker, it's
Yeah.
true.
And by the time Jimmy is recording at Record Plant, doing 50 takes, getting
Yeah.
his producer to quit, MLK has been assassinated. The Tet Offensive is about to blow the Vietnam War wide open. Things are just going nuts.
Yeah, 68 is a very different year than 67.
Absolutely. So getting back to recording Electric Ladyland, Jimmy had loved Bob Dylan for some time. It seems like he basically really strongly identified
Yeah.
with Bob. And he said, sometimes I play Dylan's songs and they are so much like me that it seems to me that I wrote them. I love that.
Yeah, that's such a great quote.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, so like it's right there in the vocals, like Jimmy with his own vocal style. He's not known for being a singer
Yeah.
in the same way that Dylan's not known for being a singer.
That's right. I
But
never
they're-
really thought of that.
but they're both-
They both have very distinct singing
Very distinctive
styles.
singing styles.
Yeah.
I feel like Jimmy identified with Bob. Part of it was because he was able to see another singer succeeding with incredible songwriting, but not necessarily having the best voice. This is an era where there's so many incredible voices.
I know.
right?
You're not going to, Aretha Franklin
found a
is
kinship.
thriving.
And there isn't punk rock yet with that lesson, which is really interesting to think about chronologically. We sort of take for granted now there's a lot of lanes you can go as a vocalist.
Yes.
But back then, to be a vocalist, to be on stage singing and not be Mahalia Jackson or something, Aretha Franklin, right?
Yeah.
It must have been something for him.
Well, as we said in our previous episode, Jimmy was actually really self-conscious about his
He was,
voice
yeah.
and had to record his vocals with a screen up so that people wouldn't see him.
Yeah, Jimmy had already covered a Dylan song. He did Like a Rolling Stone live at Monterey in 67.
Yeah.
How does it feel, baby? How does it feel?
He loved his latest record, the LP, John Wesley Harding, which had come out. He'd apparently go around to parties and sort of like hold it up to people. And he wanted to sort of be
Yeah.
associated with it. He
I
really
heard
had
that story.
a
He
deep,
kept it under his arm,
yeah,
he said.
he had a deep connection to this music and to this artist. And he knew he wanted to cover a song. And at a certain point, he chose All Along the Watchtower. That was the one.
And look, I'm just going to come clean here. I have personally avoided the music of Bob Dylan as my own personal boycott against the music writ large of the baby boomers. I felt like it was
Okay.
forced on me. Bob Dylan is like, the person they put the most, I feel like, on the songwriting pedestal.
Wait, do you hear that?
Yeah.
That's the sound of the boomers in the comments. I can hear them.
That's the sound of a million keyboards firing
A
up to
million
come
keyboard
flaming.
warriors
But
coming
listen,
at
I'm
you.
just being honest. Obviously, anybody who writes for a living, as I do, has immense respect, actually, for Bob Dylan. I think that there's always been something musically about his particular style of folk music. It's never moved me. It's
Listen,
never
I'm going to
moved me.
support you on this. I've never been the biggest Dylan fan, but what I like to say, and this is very true, and on the show, hopefully, if you've listened to the show many times, if you've listened to every
Hopefully.
episode, which you ought to, we are the opposite of gatekeepers. We
Yeah.
believe that every potential song or artist, there's a gate that just has to open. I just haven't found my way into Dylan yet. Actually, maybe
I
studying
didn't
for
know
this
this.
episode.
Do we kind of have this in common a
it's
little
just a matter of not being exposed to it in such a way that I've like related to it and connected to it.
bit? I did not know that we had this in
I think
common.
in part for me, it's because I connect so much sonically to the musical part of the music itself.
Yes.
Like chord changes that are unusual and surprising melodies.
the drums, the driving rhythm.
Dylan is about storytelling, almost 100%. You're not going to hear innovative chords or melodies. You are going to be riveted by the storytelling. And in some ways, I think people really are attracted to the voice. I'm talking about a giant catalog, so there's a lot of reasons to love Dylan. I personally haven't found my way into it. I think because it's not sonically as interesting as what
I
I
love
tend
the
to like.
way you put that. You have not found your way into Dylan. I'm sure that at some point,
I think it will
somebody in
happen
these
someday.
comments is going to be like, guys, here's your gateway drug for Dylan. Try listening to that. In the meantime, we're going to listen to a small clip of All Along the Watchtower.
Actually, Dale, that's a great challenge for us right now. Why don't we listen to Bob Dylan's original version of All Along the Watchtower
Yeah.
and pretend that we're Jimi Hendrix in 1967 and see if
I
we
love
can
it.
hear what he was hearing maybe.
Businessmen, they drink
He starts laughing right away. He starts laughing
Sounds like
right
a guy
away.
imitating Bob Dylan.
Laughing right away. It is a little hard to get over the hump of the voice. The voice is a hump. The voice is a bit of an impediment.
That is a Bob Dylan. That is somebody. That's
a
not
Bob
the real
Dylan
version.
impersonator.
That's a Bob Dylan impression. Is that really the?
He really overdid it too. He dialed up the Bob Dylan. We're doing our best to be open-minded. We are definitely open-minded. We are two of the most open-minded men you'll
Go
ever
on and
meet.
send me the evil comments. I'm fine with it. That was an honest reaction. Here, play it back. Play it back.
No reason to get excited.
Okay, what's Jimmy hearing?
The thief he kindly spoke.
I think Jimmy's hearing a great song
Yeah.
and an okay voice. And a voice that he can emulate. When you do a cover, part of what you're trying to do, right, is put your stamp on something that's already known.
Sure.
You're inherently, in some way, you have to like kind of artistically put this aside, but there is some implicit competition. You have to do something that is different or better than or different enough than that people won't unfavorably compare your
Yeah.
version to the original.
Right.
Perhaps he's genuinely a fan of Dylan as a songwriter, but he also hears in Dylan something that he can maybe best.
Well, listen, I think he hears great lyrics.
Great
you know,
storytelling.
I will say, you know, even though I was laughing because it sounded almost like a Dylan impersonator in a second, you can't get past these lyrics. Like he's talking in such bold, big terms.
Right. And big
He's got
riddles.
these characters.
A lot of
Joker,
ambiguity.
thief.
It's storytelling with ambiguity both together,
Yeah.
so no two people are going to interpret it the same. There's a beautiful poetry in that.
But you know what you also made me think of is that, you know, often if you go into a studio to record something, a lot of times there's been somebody who will record a version for, you know, the singer to hear, you know, like
Like a demo version, right?
Yeah, like a demo, like this is what the song's supposed to sound like. And I've been in those sessions where the person who sang the demo is really kind of like doing a good job.
Yeah.
And then you bring in the actual singer, the star, whatever that is. And sometimes they will immediately try and you can see them think, how am I going to make this mine? Like, how am I
Exactly
going
right.
to change this in my interpretation so that nobody will ever say, we should have just put out the demo.
That's right. That is always the goal with a cover is like you've got to get someone to choose yours
Yeah.
over the one they already know.
So Jimmy's version comes out, what, like 6 months? Like 6 months after Bob's. That's incredible to me. That's like Tyler, the Creator, releasing his version of Squabble Up.
It's
You know,
crazy back
like
in
right
the day
now.
that they would have done that. So many covers came out while something was fresh in the air because the
Yeah.
origin of the term cover version is you're covering a part of the market not covered by the original, right?
Is that? I did
yeah.
not know that.
Yeah, the legacy of cover versions is if
That's
this,
why we call it a cover.
Yeah, because if this audience is hearing it, this audience isn't. So this harkens back to the racist origins of cover versions. But to oversimplify it, if there was for the
There's a
black
race
audience,
record
that's
over
right.
here.
The rock and roll record gets it to the white people is essentially
got
where
it.
it comes from, right?
So you're covering the public.
Covering the
Wow.
market.
I did not know. I
Yeah.
did not know that. I did not know the etymology of covers.
But you instinctively understood what was happening.
The second,
It's the
oh
same
man,
exact
that's so
thing.
cool.
Yeah.
So when we get back from our break, we're going to hear Jimi Hendrix's version of All Along the Watchtower. We will give you the voice of Jimi Hendrix, the guitar mastery of Jimi Hendrix, and the parts of this song you may have never noticed or heard before. When we come back, stick around. All right, welcome back to One Song Luxury. Let's get into some stems.
Yes.
Shall we start with the drums?
Let's do it. Well, we got Mitch Mitchell and a secret surprise guest who's on this track. Let's start with the isolated, incredible fill that begins the song,
Yes.
and I'll tell you what's going on. Oh, we love that
So
Mitch
good.
Mitchell so much.
It's really, really
We
good.
love the Mitch Mitchell. We gave him some flowers on our Purple Haze
yep.
episode. Jazz trained drummer, British gentleman, and actually the only member of the Experience, aside from Jimmy, on this song. We'll be getting into that in just a moment.
Wow, I didn't know that. Okay.
But there is a sound that we all responded to.
Yes, I used to call this the rattlesnake. What is that rattlesnake sound?
Well, you're consistent, if nothing else, because we've heard this sound on this show before, and I think you said rattlesnake before. This is the same instrument. It's called a vibroslap that we also heard at the beginning of Nothing But a G Thing,
Wow.
the Dr. Dre Snoop episode.
Yes.
And for those astute ear-having listeners, we will one day do a third song that it's on. We will one day be doing Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne, which also begins with the sound. But getting back to the story of this song being made, I love the story of who's on this track, who made that sound happen. So, are you familiar with Brian Jones?
Of course.
Of course
Yeah.
you are. Now I would go so far as to say for the story of this song, he may even be the unsung hero.
Wow. Yeah, because that is a very important part of the song.
Insofar as what he added, that sound, and what he didn't add, which we'll be getting to in just a minute.
Okay.
But for those who don't know, Brian Jones was the founding member of a very famous rock band. And in the telling of Keith Richards in 1962, when they were just getting started, this gentleman, Brian, was on the phone with a booker. They needed a band name to book their first ever gig. So he looks on the floor and sees a copy of The Best of Muddy Waters. Side 1, track 5 is the Rolling Stone Blues. And that's how the band became the Rolling
I
Stones.
know that.
So Brian Jones, unfortunately, tragically passes away just a year after this track at age 27. An unsolved
27
mystery, drowned in the swimming pool. To this day, no one has the full story of what happened. But in this moment, he was deeply, deeply inebriated, wanders into the studio, wants to contribute something, and Jimmy famously has a lot of hangers-on at this time that are in similar states
Yeah,
of
totally.
control versus not control at any given moment.
Mm-hmm.
So the story that engineer Eddie Kramer tells is that Brian walked in, quote, actually, he staggered in. He practically fell on the floor in the control room, completely out of his brain. But he was a good friend of Jimmy's, and Jimmy could never say no to his mates. So basically, they hand him some percussion, and he starts rattling stuff, and it makes it to the
It's like
final
when you walk
cut.
into a kindergarten classroom and you hand an instrument to each child.
That's kind of exactly what happened. And the beauty of it is that vibra slap is so iconic in the song, and it does make the cut.
It really
So
does.
I'm putting my vote in for Brian Jones
I did
as
not know that was Brian Jones playing the
unsung
vibrato.
hero. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So let's keep listening to the drums because Mitch Mitchell does some other powerful things in the song. He is basically the structure of this song is its verse, chorus, verse.
Yeah.
And the verses are chill and the choruses are where everything kind of explodes.
Mm-hmm.
So the song begins with one of those explosive choruses. We were just about to hear it.
And by the way, we're calling it the chorus. There actually isn't any lyrical content at the
That's right.
chorus.
That's right. I'm only kind of setting aside the word chorus because the verses are
What's repeated.
it's repeating and it's also
Yeah.
kind of louder. Like for lack of a better way of putting it, like the
Yeah.
verses are where the vocals are, the lyrics are. And then every chorus we have actually across the song 4 different guitar solos. And in the drums we have an explosion of drums and toms and Mitch Mitchell doing his thing. And he's doing a Motown beat, which I had never noticed
I
before.
never thought of it. That is a Motown
I had
beat.
never noticed that
Wow.
before until I was digging in. But yeah, that's the snare on 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
4, which at the time would have been very well known for all of the Motown hits that would have used it.
Oh, that's
That's
super
what
cool.
he's doing here. And actually, that is faithful to the original Dylan version. As we go through the song, we'll kind of point out where things are different. But so in the original version, Kenneth Buttrey on drums is playing the Motown beat. And then in the verse, he gets a little more chill. So here's Mitch Mitchell chilling out in the verses. I love that. Boop-a-cat. Boop-a-cat. And this interesting thing that happens at the end, listen to this turnaround. Right here.
Ah,
Boop-a-cat,
wow.
boop-a-cat, boop-a-cat, boom, boop-a-cat.
Yeah, that's fun.
It throws me every time. Yeah.
I love the way these drums sound. And I remember in our previous episode, we talked about how Eddie Kramer's drums, the
Right.
engineer, his drums have that sound. I think I hear it here.
Yeah, you're
Am
right.
I correct?
You are correct that you're
Okay.
hearing the drums that are recorded by Eddie Kramer
Yeah.
at Olympic Studios in London. And he gets that big,
Okay.
roomy sound. And you have Mitch Mitchell, the performer, also contributing to that incredible
Oh, that's
sound.
cool. Because I know this album was recorded in 2 different places. So this
Yeah.
song was recorded at Olympic.
So the song is tracked at Olympic. So all of the instruments, up until the guitars at least, so the rhythm section basically, and I believe the acoustic guitar as well, is all tracked at Olympic. So what they do is they bring the 4-track, because it's
a
in
4-track.
England, they still...
we mentioned that on the Purple Haze.
incredibly. It's
episode.
recorded on 4 tracks,
Yeah.
only 4 tracks,
Yeah.
I should say. But 8 tracks and 12 tracks exist in this moment. They just aren't in studios in England yet, interestingly. So they do the tracking in Olympic on the 4-track. And apparently Eddie Kramer and Chaz Chandler mixed the song from the 4-track in Olympic Studios in London. But Hendrix is not crazy about it. He isn't really happy with it. And this is happening with a lot of other tension going on with Chandler. And at a certain point, Chandler leaves and actually sells his ownership stake in the management company. He's out.
Wow, he's
out
out.
of the Jimi Hendrix story.
No.
He leaves during the making of this record. And Jimmy and Kramer both go to New York to finish the record at a new studio at Record Plant, literally a brand new, recently built studio.
Facility.
It's the first record that's ever been mixed there, in fact. And he goes there at the invitation of the second engineer on this record, who's already at Record Plant. In fact, he helped to create it. That's the guy called Gary Kellgren. He helped to build this studio. He invites Kramer to come work with him, and the team moves from London to New York to finish this record together.
Whole different entourage at the Record Plant. I see Jimmy just, like bringing in different friends when he hits New York.
Well, and once Chaz Chandler is gone, it gets really kind of crazy. So the Brian Joneses of the world start to the hangers on. Yeah. There's a party in the studio atmosphere, which with Chandler, it wasn't a party in the studio. He was very focused and directed, and a lot of stuff got done. 2 whole albums, right, in 7 months were completed under his auspices. So it's a different environment. To hear the Eddie Kramer telling of it, it's a lot more freeing, and Hendrix loves the freedom. Yeah. He isn't tightly confined to, first of all, 4 tracks. Right. He has a lot more freedom with not even 8 tracks. They leapfrogged out to 12 tracks at the Record Plant. And he's bringing in his mates and he's jamming and he's trying all kinds of things like 13-minute songs. So that's the environment in Electric Ladyland.
I love that.
Electric Lady Studios comes later, by the way, not to be confused with.
Why don't we talk about the bass in this song?
Yeah, let's talk about the bass. There's a story behind the bass guitar. Yeah,
I love the bass in this song.
Yeah,
I love the bass in this song.
It's really special.
When we were, every time before we do an episode, I always drive to the studio and I'm blasting the song as loud as possible, trying to pretend like I'm in the studio. And I realized that when I'm listening to All Along the Watchtower, a lot of times I'm humming along with the bass.
Really?
The bass really jumps out to me. Mm-hmm. It really sounds cool. And I didn't know that that's not Noel playing the bass.
It's apparently, not Noel Redding from The Experience. No, he's out.
He got really pissed one time while they were recording, and he's down at the pub.
Right.
He's checked out. He's just Jimmy could go F himself. And Jimmy ended up playing the bass on the track. So can we hear a little bit of Jimmy on bass?
He's laying it down, big, round, warm notes.
It is. And you know what? Hearing it right now without every other instrument around it, I'll be honest, it's a little underwhelming. But when you hear it in the context of the song, it's amazing. Maybe give me the bass with the drums. I just want to feel it.
You got it. I'll do you one better. A lot of times on the show, we play a track, and as the track progresses, the player starts to do more and more stuff. So that was the beginning. By the middle of the song, he's starting to throw in some more fills and interesting stuff. He gets a little busier. This is the second chorus. Let's listen isolated, and I will throw in the drums to fulfill your request.
Woo, that's good.
Put some drums back in. I feel like you've not ruined, but
the Virus Lab is going hard, bro.
I will never hear the song without picturing you doing what you just did every time that damn Virus Lab came in.
I wonder if somebody was like, all right, Brian, you've done really well, Brian. It's time to go.
They kept it in.
It makes the song. It's a great part of the song.
It is a wonderful part of the song.
I love that the bass is going so strong. And it's way more prominently used, I think, than in our part 1 episode song, Purple Haze. Am I wrong?
It's interesting to think about it being Jimmy playing it, because that means that everything that isn't the drums...
It was not played at that time. It's an overdub.
Exactly. First of all, it's an overdub. And second of all, it's Jimmy playing it, and he also played guitar. Therefore, it's the same performer. We just did an episode with Patrice Rushen, who did a similar thing. She's playing the Rhodes and she's playing the bass line. And because it's the same performer on both, they match, they intertwine in a very special way. That can only happen when it's the same player doing it the same way.
100%. Yeah.
It's no shade to separate bass players at all.
And it's no shade to people who think the music sounds better when it's actually being played all in real time.
Right, exactly.
But this is a point in the 60s where everybody from the Beatles, everybody's really, twirling some knobs in the studio.
I'm also realizing as we're listening back, when we get to the guitar in just a moment, you will be hearing a lot of the complicated overdubs and splicing that was done once they got to Record Plant and they had more tracks to play with. One of the things that was overdubbed to my ears, I'm pretty sure that bass was overdubbed because it is so separated. Compared to Purple Haze from last week, that was also done on the same 4-track at the same studio, and there was so much bleed and it wasn't nearly as warm and round. So I think that this may have actually been overdubbed because it's so different sounding.
It's very different
Yeah.
sounding. Is there anything else from the bass you want to play?
Listen, we love the bass and we love Jimmy playing it, so there's a few more cool fills. This is towards the end. I'll put some drums in. And the song's about to end right here. Once again, the song fades out in real life, but the band had to stop playing it, and that's where they stopped playing it.
So let's talk about guitars. There's an acoustic guitar on this track. Is that Jimmy playing the acoustic guitar?
So interestingly, that is not Jimmy on acoustic guitar. It's actually Dave Mason, one of the founding members of Traffic with Stevie Winwood.
Oh, wow.
He's playing a 12-string acoustic guitar. He is also the background vocalist in Crosstown Traffic.
Great song, by the way. One of my favorite Jimi Hendrix
It's
songs.
one of the
Yeah,
best, absolutely.
It's so catchy.
That's him with the falsetto up there. Exactly. And the way Dave tells the story, he says, quote, Jimmy and I sat down facing each other. So you're facing Jimi Hendrix and you've got a guitar and you're not Jimi Hendrix. Just imagine that. Imagine how intimidating that is. Jimmy was on a 6-string. Dave Mason had the 12-string guitar. And quote, it took me 10 or 11 takes to get the timing of the intro right. Jimmy could have just as easily done it himself. That's so interesting. I wonder why he kept him on. He might have just enjoyed having the appearance of another band he liked or a friend of his on the track, similar to Brian Jones. As this story unfolds, I find that interesting that he didn't really need these other players, but he clearly
But
wanted
he
them.
liked them, and I
Yeah.
think that goes to the party type. Listen, I'm torn on the party type atmosphere in a work environment
Yeah.
because I think sometimes it works and sometimes it's the downfall, right?
Yeah.
Like we all know that like some of our favorite groups is like, yeah, that album we burned through that advance pretty quick. And if the album is, shitty, then you're like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. But this is one of those times where you're like, hey, it kind of worked.
It kind of worked, right. There are a few stories I've read about how the intro was challenging for some of the players. And when I listen back, I think it's because the timing is like syncopated a little bit. But let's listen together to that 12-string guitar that opens the song and think, why was this so hard? Why did it take 11 takes? Because it's pretty simple stuff. I have a theory, but do you have any thoughts on why that was hard to play?
I don't even think it was hard to play. I think this speaks to the fact that Jimmy, now that he does have that control that we've talked about, is becoming more and more of a perfectionist.
Yeah.
Like you'll hear about, directors, everybody from, Scorsese to Wes Anderson. Wes Anderson, notoriously, you might do 30 takes. You know what I mean? Like,
He
I
just
think
wants
this
it right.
He just wants it right. He
Right.
wants what he hears in his head played out. And I think that makes sense.
I think what it might also be is from the telling again. I think there was a challenge of the timing of it. And we have to remember in 1968, there's syncopated music. I mean, it's been around
Sure.
for a while. There's been jazz for a long time. But there are also performers for whom playing on the and of 3, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. It sounds as though that was challenging to get right. It's sort of like you hear stories of drummers and guitar players being taught reggae rhythms in the early 70s when they're new, and it being really hard for them to figure out how to play. Like on Bob Marley records, there are there's a couple of guitar players who are brought in, Muscle Shoals players, and apparently it's hard for them to get the chuck on the offbeats right.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, when I heard these stories and I listened back, I was like, maybe it's just hard to be on the and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So he does that throughout the song. This is the 12-string acoustic, and you'll also hear mixed in Jimmy playing his 6-string. There's at least 2 guitars in the mix, and here it is. And there's a second guitar here you can really hear, right here. Do-do-do-do-do.
What's interesting to me about this acoustic guitar is that it's the one element that seems to harken back
Right.
most clearly
The most
to Bob
that's
Dylan.
common to the Bob
Yeah.
Dylan version. You're right.
But even in the way that it's being played feels a little bit more, I don't know, the word I want to use is poignant. Like there's a certain sort of oh man, we're in this shit together. You know what I mean? Like there's
It's darker sounding.
Yeah, it's darker sounding. They've slowed it down.
Much slower.
They've
yeah.
slowed it down and they're jabbing at that guitar.
It's much slower. You're right. I tried to do so. I think the original is around 129 BPM. This one fluctuates like crazy. I did my BPMs across the song. It kind of starts like around this part of the song is 109 to 113. Already a variation.
Yeah.
But by the end, you're getting up to 119.
When you get to the verses, I feel like you really slow down, right? Am I right?
Well, in the beginning of the song, it's slower. It's hovering around 110. By the end, you're almost to 120. Across the song, we speed up by 10 BPM, which is the sign of human beings playing the instruments and vibing off of what the song is calling to do.
Yes, but I'd even say like even the BPM is getting more and more stressed out. Like even the BPM is telling a story because like his heart is starting to race. And so by the end, when we get to the end where they see the riders in the distance, like, oh man, now we're caught up.
It absolutely contributes to that feeling. I completely agree. Yeah.
So I was reading that Jimmy was left-handed, which means that I guess he had to play his guitar upside down.
Yeah, so this is a famous part of the Jimi Hendrix lore is he is a lefty. But back in the day, there weren't left-handed guitars, or if they were hard to find even if you're Jimi Hendrix. He would go to Manny's and just buy an off-the-rack Stratocaster for right-handed players, flip it over, and restring it so that the low strings would still be on the top, but the tensions, meaning the tensions are the things that you twist to make the strings stay on the instrument, would be reversed. And the reason why this is relevant is it contributes to his sound. What would normally be the tighter strings at the top were looser, and what would normally be the looser strings at the bottom were tighter. And the pickups were reversed too. So all of these factors adding to his innate gift as a player, which was unique in and of itself, and going back to Purple Haze, some of the new sounds he's adding with the fuzz pedals and the Arcadia. He arrives at the
instrument different.
He's playing, the sound is being shaped by all of these things adding up to being something very unique and contributing to the impossible to pin down thing of why does he sound the way he does and how is it so unique?
Yeah, I'm so curious how that affects his sound, specifically on this song. Can we hear a little bit of his, can we start with his solo? His first solo.
That's right. The song begins with one of 4 solos that play during this, what we'll be calling the chorus section of the song. And here it is.
The instrumental choruses.
And notice that it's the same, this one distinguishing factor versus the others, it's the same rhythm that we heard in the other instruments. Da, 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 da. So all 4 of those phrases are mimicking that dun 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 dun. Exactly.
So let's hear what he does once we get to the first verse.
So he's just kind of playing little arpeggios and fills of the 3 chords. So the structure of the song, as we kind of alluded to, is very simple. The verse and the chorus are the same. It's the same 3 chords. The difference is in the verse he's singing, and in the chorus he's playing guitar, he's soloing. But the 3 chords are, it's the 1, the 7, and the 6. It's a 2-bar loop, and that's the entirety of the song.
I'd love to hear the second solo.
So this is where we start to hear some interesting stuff going on with the overdubbing. So I'll play it for you, and then I'll explain what's happening. So let me just play for you what else is in the mix. It's a little bit lower, just to prepare your ears because it's a little surprising. Underneath that solo is this, also in the mix. And when I put them together, they sound the same. It's the same solo being played. The difference is one is an overdub where it's just him playing guitar. The other appears to be the wholesale track spliced in almost like a sample because they were going from 4 tracks at Olympic to 12 tracks at the Power Station. And apparently they kept re-recording, they kept overdubbing. Jimmy kept saying, I think I hear it a little bit differently. He would want to keep some of the stuff they already had, replace it with new things. And by the end of it, they just had this kind of patchwork of overdubbed, new isolated parts and stuff from the original multi-track. And in the mix, you don't know that it's there, but isolated, again, what you just heard is in the final mix underneath everything else.
Yeah.
And it's just the entirety of like a 4-track. So I'll start building on that. That's the full track. So you're hearing like 2 Mitch Mitchells in there, right? You're hearing 2 Jimmys. And it's interesting contextually knowing that now. the bass is doing a lot of work. This big new round bass is covering up a lot of that because they didn't have the techniques yet to do that with other tools. They weren't able to separate all of those pieces in this kind of sample, for lack of a better word, of the original track. Anyway, that was a revelation to me as I was listening in this, how much feels like kind of a DIY collage using these brand new studio tools.
Yeah, these new tools. I want to get to, I think we're coming up on the middle of the song. I think there's a slide in here.
Mm-hmm. This is probably my favorite part.
This is crazy. Let's hear the slide.
This is Jimmy playing slide guitar in the third solo after the second verse.
Yeah.
So beautiful. And then it goes into another iconic second half of that solo, I would say, where you hear his wah pedal, which he has started to use iconically, and one of only 3 known guitar pedals that he was using at the time. But again, I will point out that what you're about to hear is extraordinarily overdubbed sounding. So you'll be hearing not just the clean guitar you heard a moment ago, we've now spliced in something that's a little bit less clean. And to be clear, that beginning and end is in the track like that. And here's what's on top of it, layering it. So it's kind of coming and going like a DJ fading in and out, or even just as though it were an isolated track of a single instrument. I'll give that to you in context. It's happening here. And now it's out. It's about to come back. Fascinating how they were able to bring together all these different disparate recordings in 1968 with a 12-track technology. It's all on tape, no Pro Tools, no digital, no screens, no editing. It is all done by hand using tape and splicing. Full credit to Gary Kellgren and Eddie Kramer for doing this pre-tech.
Are there any Jimmy chords in this song?
I didn't hear any Jimmy chords in this song.
Okay.
He's really keeping it faithful to Dylan, who literally probably could not play a Jimmy chord. I think Dylan's part of his charm was that as a troubadour, as a basic storyteller, he's using basic chords and he isn't throwing in a lot of jazz into his work. So Jimmy kind of restrains himself and he's really limiting himself to basically the blues scale. There's a lot, almost every note is part of the pentatonic scale that he plays on the guitar and sings. We'll be hearing that in a second. But there's about 4 or 5 total notes in the melodic palette of the song across the entire song.
I heard there was almost a piano on this song. Is that right?
Listen, there's an incredible story that Eddie Kramer himself tells. I will leave it to the engineer who was on the session, telling the story of how there almost was a terrible piano track.
We're about take 19, deep into it, right? And I'm hearing this, all of a sudden I hear this really horrendous piano, clang, 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 wrong chords, all out of time and stuff. And it's Brian Jones. He'd slipped into the studio and he's completely out of his mind. And he stumbled onto the piano right in the middle of a take. And I'm going, Jimmy's looking at me, get him out of here, get him out of here.
Wow.
So I walk in, hey, Brian, come on, come with me. Come and sit in front of the board. You hang out here for a minute.
They literally treating him like the toddler you were referring to with the toys. Here, come play with this. So there is no piano on the final, thank God, because they were able to get Brian Jones inebriated out of the studio before he could ruin this incredible song.
Jimmy might have felt a little insecure about his voice, but we love his voice. And I'm so excited to hear some of his isolated vocals. So can you give us verse 1?
There must be some kind of way out of here, said a joker to the thief. There's too much confusion.
He does change, famously, Dylan's lyrics at the end of this verse.
Right.
None will level on the line. Nobody of it is worth.
Yeah, the Dylan line is, none of them along the line know what any of it is worth.
Right. Hendrix changed this lyric. It's one of the only differences in the lyrics in the
Yeah.
whole song. There's a couple of words a little later, but this is the main change that he made. Why do you think he did that?
Good question. I think he changes the line here because he's making it in some ways more immediate. This is just my theory, more immediate to the year 1968. Like it sounds more like it's speaking to those times. And I think in general, this song, even though, there's the book of Isaiah, maybe the book of Revelations elements in the lyrics, all that has been said many times in many books on Dylan's lyrics. But when I hear this, I hear a political song.
Yeah, I think you're right. I hear what you're hearing.
I hear, the Joker and the thief, two people who are, society looks down upon, and they're talking about how they can't get any relief and there must be some way out of here. Like, they sound like they are, for the lack of a better term, turning against society.
Yeah.
And they're about to cause change. I feel like they're really like, we're about to change this. Like, we're about to go at the system. We're about to go at society.
No, I think the change he makes seems to be saying everyone's lying, right?
Right.
No one will level on the line.
Yeah.
Nobody offers their word.
Yeah.
Or nobody would, literally, sorry, it's nobody offered his word. But that sounds like what Hendrix is saying is everyone's lying to us. And he obviously felt that way. He was like extraordinarily opposed. He had been in the army, right? So his sensitivity to like his former friends going off to war in Vietnam was heightened. Everyone was feeling
Everybody
that way,
was saying,
but he had been there.
And
could have been
and
him.
that's why it's about 1968, but it's also about like right now. Like we're recording this episode in 2025, and I feel like you can't go a day without somebody saying, "Oh, that's AI. Oh, that's media bias. Oh, that's misinformation.
Oh, everyone's lying. Right?
Everybody's lying.
Everyone's lying.
It feels like even though it's written then, we feel like we've been thrown smack dab back into a very 1968 environment where we're on a crazy ride and we don't know where we're going.
And we can't trust anybody.
And we can't trust anybody, but maybe I could trust this thief and maybe I can trust this Joker.
That's a really interesting take. I think you're onto something with that.
Can I hear a little bit of the third verse? Because obviously the third verse gives this song its title, and it's also got one of my favorite lines about the Wildcat. Can we hear verse 3?
Absolutely. And I mentioned before that this song has a pretty limited melodic palette. He's not using a lot of notes. They're all the pentatonic scale. At this point, he goes to the highest note you hear in the song. He starts on the flat seventh, and here it is.
All along the watchtower,
Those are all pentatonic notes.
Princess kept the view, while all the women came and went.
That imagery.
It's really chilling, yeah. And what I think, to me, what Hendrix does to transform the Dylan version is how cinematic it all feels.
Dude.
Like this is hairs on the back of your neck standing out.
Yes,
right?
you can see the princes, in their towers, and yet here come, these writers. When the wind began to howl, the winds of change, the coming of the fall of a society and the birth of something new. Right. And I do feel like right now, even in our society, we're experiencing disruption and change on almost every level. And so listening to this song this week, it was just like, are we doomed to repeat history? Well, in some ways, I hope that we're doomed to repeat history because that means we're still present, we're still alive, and maybe some good guys will finally win at some point.
That would be nice for once, right?
That would be really nice.
When you mentioned what you said about Howl, it also made me realize, like, in this moment, there's probably some awareness of like Allen Ginsberg, right? And Howl, his famous poem, would have been in the air, would have been passed around. People were probably all passing around a copy of that book.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is like also interesting to note the confluence with Dylan to Hendrix of two different forms of folk music. We say folk music, but blues is also folk music. These are both traditions that go back hundreds and hundreds of years, shared traditions of stories and music, the music itself, the pentatonic scale I keep alluding to that's in this song. So I love the thought that both of these artists have found kind of this shared song for their different shared traditions. And to be explicit about it, folk music is the shared traditions that goes back to Scotland and England and the Moors. It is European. And blues is a Black tradition. So we have in this one song a sharing of a melding of traditions and kind of, I wouldn't say a passing of the torch, but in a way it is a little a passing of the torch because Dylan ended up covering his own song from this point forward in concert.
Absolutely.
He would always do Hendrix's version, which he really loved.
He was doing his cover of his own song.
Yes. I got lost in that sentence, but I knew what you meant.
But you knew where I was going.
I knew where you were going.
All right, now that we've listened to the stems, Tell me about the splits.
Dylan, 100%, because it's a cover. But this is the moment in Dylan's career that he's about to sue and leave his former manager for ripping him off. So in the moment that the song comes out, I think Dylan gets 50% of the money because his manager is ripping him off for the other half of it. And that would be the famous Albert Grossman. So yeah, the next year he sues him, takes him to court, and wins back, I think, the royalties. But for a few months, while Jimi Hendrix is on the charts, he's only getting 50 cents on the dollar.
Oh, wow. Well, after this album, the pure success of it, Jimmy goes solo. And he goes on to do this famous performance at Woodstock. He continues to make music, opening the Electric Lady Studios in New York, and then we lose him.
And then we lose him at 27.
He dies at the much too young age of 27. Luxury, we're coming up on the end of 2 full episodes on one of the greatest musicians ever, 2 of his songs. What do you think is the legacy here for Jimi Hendrix?
So I'll answer from a musician's perspective. Growing up playing guitar, like learning guitar, playing it, he's been in the pantheon this entire time. He has never left the Mount Rushmore of guitar players if you're a new guitar player. And I love the fact that all these years later, while there's been Eddie Van Halen, and then there was maybe Yngwie, and there's always guitar heroes from one generation to the next, but Jimmy has never fallen from favor.
Yep.
And not only that, he probably is the number one of most rock-influenced or blues-influenced guitar, and not just jazz guitar players too, to this day, because what he brought to the instrument and the expression is so unique and impossible to replicate. As much as across 2 episodes, we've sort of broken down, well, he's playing the upside down guitar and the strings and the pentatonic scales. We can kind of make a list of things he did from one song to the next, but you could never piece them together and it's a formula to do it yourself. But I don't know a single guitar player that hasn't tried, myself included.
I love that. For me, I think his legacy is, I just think of it as, it's pure art, right? Like it's a pure artist and it's art. And he might have been personally hard to get along with. Sorry, Noel. Sorry, everybody else who left the band. But at the end of the day, I think one trait of great art that actually means something is that it continues to inspire new artists. He's inspired you. In his own way, he inspires me. You'll hear everybody from Frank Ocean to Andre 3000. Like you said, every generation eventually comes around to saying, oh, that guy, he did something special.
He did something no one else has done.
He did something special that you cannot copy.
Yeah.
You can copy it, but you're not going to do it the way he did it. You're not going to do it better.
With his unique voice, his unique expression.
Voice,
I sort of said this on the Purple Haze episode, but the unique marriage of singing and playing guitar where they are both unified, they are both his voice. Yeah. It's almost a seamless blend of the two. No one else can do it in quite the same way.
Yeah. To this day, he is absolutely missed. Well, listen, as always, you can find me on Instagram at Diallo, D-I-A-L-L-O, and on TikTok at Diallo Riddle.
And you can find me on Instagram at LUXXURY and on TikTok at LuxuryXX.
And you can follow our podcast at One Song Podcast on Instagram and TikTok for exclusive content. Also, you can watch full episodes of One Song on YouTube and Spotify. Just search for One Song Podcast. We would love it if you'd like and subscribe.
Also, be sure to check out the One Song Spotify playlist for all the songs we discuss in our episodes. You can find the link in our episode description.
Listen to that on your road trip this summer. If you made it this far, we think that means you like this podcast, so please don't forget to give us 5 stars, leave a review, and share us with someone who you think would like this show. It really helps us keep it going. Luxury, help me end this thing.
I'm producer, DJ, songwriter, and musicologist Luxury.
And I'm actor, writer, director, and sometimes DJ, Diallo Riddle.
And this is One Song. We will see you next time.
This episode was produced by Melissa Duenas. Our video editor is Casey Simonson. Our associate producer is Jeremy Bimbo. Mixing by Michael Hardman and engineering by Eric Hicks. Production supervision by Razak Boykin. Additional production support from Z Taylor. The show is executive produced by Kevin Hart, Mike Stein, Brian Smiley, Eric Eddings, Eric Weil, and Leslie Guam.